And good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern. I am your host, Dr. Ashaki Noni Nichols, and thank you so much for coming through. Wow. So, there's been a lot going on with a lot of the conflict, I would say, in the Middle East. Everybody's very much on edge. And so I did a little research, watched some other commentary that I wanted to share with you guys in regards to that. But I'm going to wait for some more people to join us this morning. And I'm also very excited because this is Mighty Men Thursday. So I'm very excited. And the content that I'll be bringing you is from Jay's analysis. And I will definitely make sure to add his links when I post later on. So you guys can definitely give him a follow on X and on YouTube. He's got some very, I would say, very informational commentary and things that, that you sit and talk about and you're wondering, like, is this true? Is this not true? And then he actually, brings factual information and also some really good books to read as well, which I will be sharing with you later on in the program. But again, it's a Mighty Men Thursday, and we are going to have Torraine Walker on with us in the top of the 8 o'clock hour. So between, let's say roughly 8 and 8:30, he'll be joining us here this morning on Unfiltered Vision News. So again, thank you for joining us. Let's get into some of the top stories that I've come across today. And one of them is the Emil Bove denies claims he urged DOJ to ignore court orders. So just very, very interesting. I was like, what? What does that even mean? Right? So I was like, okay, let's check this out. So Emil Bove, a Trump nominee for the Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, has denied allegations made by a whistleblower that he suggested Department of Justice attorneys should disregard court orders that would slow Trump administration efforts to deport unauthorized immigrants. Okay. Wow. That is a serious allegation. Very serious. So, Bove, a former criminal defense attorney for President Trump, testified in front of the Senate that he never advised any DOJ attorney to violate a court order. He called the accusations wildly inaccurate and said they do not call into question his qualifications to serve as a circuit judge. The whistleblower, former DOJ attorney Erez Renovi Reuveni, sorry about that, claimed that Bove proposed the department should ignore court orders and that Bove had made repeated attempts to willingly disobey or ignore court orders. So, for context, Bove's nomination has faced scrutiny following Renovi's allegations. Bove previously represented Trump in his New York hush money trial and defended him in two federal criminal cases brought by the DOJ. So Bove was also involved in the dismissal of federal corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams, which has prompted further controversy. So this is how the media covered it. So CBS News, that leans left biased, highlighted the allegations made by Reuveni and the reactions of Democrats who suggested that these claims render Bove unfit to serve on the appeals court. The Washington Examiner focused on Bove's denials of the allegations, his testimony in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the whistleblower's connections to the Government Accountability Project an organization with ties to liberal donors. The Hill, which is center, included both the allegations and Bove's rebuttals, noting that the Trump administration officials dismissed Ravenhi's accusations as the actions of a disgruntled employee. So that's a lot, right? That's a lot. Wow. Okay. So, you've got this person, that's a nominee, and he defended Trump. And he was successful, in defending Trump in several cases. And so now he would turn to, okay. But I'm glad they brought up the fact that the whistleblower themselves, had ties to a liberal donor organization, the Government Accountability Project, right? It's like, there's a lot going on. There are a lot of people that really want to stop what this administration is doing. And when people are this forceful, it does make me call into question their motives. At any rate, are you really doing this on behalf of the American people, or is this more self-interest? Right? Because I'm leaning toward the self-interest part. And of course, we went over yesterday how this, and they're calling him a socialist. He wins New York Democratic mayoral primary. My whole thing with this person winning, and I don't know if anybody else out there is thinking this, but I really think that they put Cuomo in there so that Mamdani could win. And then, my people might think, well, that's weird, because he kind of, split the vote. Exactly. He split the vote enough. And people were already dissatisfied as Cuomo being governor. Why in the world would they vote for him as mayor? I really think he was placed there to push people towards Mamdani. I really do. Because, this is someone, and I'm definitely for people wanting to run for office and wanting to, champion the causes of American citizens, right? But all I see is somebody who wants to support illegal immigration. I see a complete socialist that's saying, we're going to have the rich pay for everything. Well, you're losing people, bro. Nobody wants to live in the city of New York because it's trash. So what are you going to clean up? I mean, let's be real frank and honest about this. Your city's a dumpster fire. So how are you going to fix that? So your idea is to go even further into socialism, which ends up, at communism, right? You want to just further destroy the city till it's unrecognizable. And what's going to happen is people are going to move out of the city. But who's it going to be replaced by? Well, they'll be replaced by lots of immigrants that don't look like us. But isn't that the point of replacement migration? The point of replacement migration, they clothe it as this whole thing. It's like, oh, well, we're trying to bring in people because of, the aging population. And no, you're replacing people. This is what happened in England. And now they've got bad problems over there because they've got a predominantly Muslim culture over there now. And of course, they're tearing everything up and destroying everything that's around them because that's what they do. And there might be people out there, listening that are from the Muslim community, but like, well, we're not all like that. I know you're not all like that. But the radical Islamists are. And wherever they go, they leave destruction in their path. Nothing that they do turns out to be beautiful or wonderful or even good for anybody around them. It's just not. It's just death and destruction and slavery. Nobody wants that here. Nobody wants that. So I'm definitely looking for the candidates that are going to run against this person. Because right now, everybody's just sitting in their feelings like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Well, you better find somebody to run against this guy. That's what you need to do. Get up out your feelings, get off the couch and get it done. Really? You're just gonna sit there and lie down? Like, oh, there's nothing we can do. Okay. Well, you can lie down. I'm not. I'm not. I'm trying to get somebody to run for mayor under the Redemption Party in New York City. Yeah. And I know a lot of people are probably sitting there going, well, do you think you can win? Well, right now, we currently run the town of Roseland successfully. And we started our run around June 2023. And we won in November of 2023. So, yes, it can be done. It's just a matter of getting off the couch and getting it done, getting the support and getting it done. Stop laying down and acting like all of these things that are happening to you, you should just sit down and allow them to happen. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. Now, this is interesting because it says, how did Mamdani win NYC's mayoral primary? Like I said, my take on it is that he won because they put Cuomo in to kind of force people to vote for Mamdani, because there were a lot of people very dissatisfied with Cuomo and they wouldn't vote for him. So it split the vote, but it also pushed people to vote for Mamdani. So they say Torraine Mamdani, the 33-year-old state assemblyman and self-proclaimed socialist, won New York City's Democratic mayoral primary on Tuesday, prompting vastly different responses across the political spectrum. A startling, hopeful vision for Democratic voters. An opinion writer for the New York Times, which is left biased, highlighted the less progressive areas in which Mamdani won, describing the election's outcome as a vivid display of Democrats building power outside the traditional party establishment. The writer commended Mamdani for being transparent about both his socialist and Muslim beliefs. And she pointed to Brad Lander, a Jewish candidate, and Mamdani's endorsements of one another in the city's ranked choice election as a turning point in the race. Okay, so they were basically saying, if you don't vote for me, vote for this guy, vice versa, right? You'll still, in their opinion, win. And here's the thing, and I know a lot of people are like, why would people vote for socialism? It never works out well, because that's what's been taught to our children for decades. Definitely starting in the 70s, right? Because when I was growing up, they tried to make communism and socialism seem like it was okay. They did. And now our children, they're like, well, if socialism seems good because, everybody's going to be equal and people will have what they need. No, they won't. It's slavery at the worst levels. At the worst levels. Now, with capitalism, you can have more freedoms. The rub is who's making the decision on who gets the business licenses in the cities, right? And what businesses are being placed strategically in certain cities to get the wealth and resources from those people. That's the other part that we don't talk about, that that's the saying the quiet part out loud, right? Because there are individuals, and what I've seen, especially in the Black community, you will see all different types of nationalities that own businesses in the Black community. Why don't the Black Americans in those communities own businesses? Because they're not given the business licenses. They're not being given the loans. It's not equal in that. And trust me, there have been several lawsuits, one from Bank of America to Wells Fargo, where they disproportionately approved loans for people not even from this country, right? And allowed them to have businesses right in the Black community. Yeah, so that's where the harms come in. But trust me, we're figuring that out. And those things are changing. And trust me, when those things really start to change and really start to turn the tide, and the Black community is able to stand on their own, where we say, we don't need you like that government. We can actually be self-sustaining as an enclave because we are, really working on that group economics where our dollars are circulating more than 6 times within our own community before $1 leaves our community. That's when a lot of other people are going to suffer because they utilize us, because we spend a lot of money, and people have discovered that. But they've also harmed our community because they're not, you know, and it's sad that I have to say allow, but what I'm saying is it's the opportunities that are not being given. And those are things that are going to change because we see what needs to change. So, a stunning political upset. Mamdani's success was due to a combination of his younger age, revolutionary progressive ideas, and the refuting of anti Semitic accusations, according to an opinion writer for Newsweek, which is Center. She asserted his victory is sure to reverberate through the Democratic Party at a time when it remains ideologically divided about its future. So Isaac Saul, which is Center, wrote, "It is no mystery why Mamdani won. He is a young, fresh, new face in the aging and boring Democratic Party and a fantastic orator to boot." Again, my opinion was, yeah, he did win because he had the money to do the advertising, get out there, and he is a fresh, new, young face, right? Again, generations of people have been brought up to believe that socialism is great. Crazy. But then they put Cuomo in this race. Where do you think people were going to go? Right? There's a lot of, you know, and I'm grateful that I'm doing this topic today, and the video that I'm going to play here for you guys in a second because it's a long video. But I want to play this video because this sets up the background for the information that we're going to get from Jay's analysis and just his perspective on what's happening, and also, like I said, some books that we can also read to further educate ourselves in what's going on right now. But I really think they put Cuomo in the race to help Mamdani win. So the worst of all possible outcomes, Michael Goodwin, who's on the right, empathetically stated, a Nepo baby who is a socialist anti-Semite came storming from behind to grab the inside track to City Hall. He claimed Mamdani won amongst a lackluster field by emotionally exploiting young people with financial struggles. Despite expressing vehement opposition to Mamdani's policies, Goodwin wrote, it proves beyond doubt that the far left remains not only alive, but dominant. Actually, yeah, not wrong. Not wrong, because I'm sure he's definitely all about the LGBTQ. He's all about, socialism. Socialism never goes well for anybody. Okay? Find me a socialist country that's doing well. And I'll back down. But you can't, because they're not doing well. Because a lot of these progressive ideas, it destroys things. We've already talked about this. Yeah, definitely destroy things. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to get into Jay's analysis, because I really want to share this with you guys before we have our guest on for Mighty Men Thursday. So I will see you guys on the other side.
A life empowered is closer than you think. we're all looking for a better way. Reimagine what's next with a new sense of exuberance. Why not power on like you mean it? Or power off blissfully? A better sleep is a better awake. You've never moved like this before. With the energy nature intended. Imagine reprogramming the way you look at the speed of science. At longevity. At exhilaration. It's next level rejuvenation. Take your well-being from the inside out and outside in. The light within is ready to ignite. Be the light. LifeWave.
And thank you so much again for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News. My name is Dr. Shakinoni Nichols, bringing you the news unfiltered Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern. So now we're going to get into this video from Jay. I'm going to pause him right there, from Jay's analysis. And you know, I do watch Alex Jones, and I noticed this video and I was like, you know what? I definitely want to play this on my show because I know this is something that a lot of people don't get exposed to because they don't like Alex Jones and they don't want to watch Alex Jones, right? So I'm watching for you. And there are times when he does have guests on that make points that are just like, wow, okay, thank you for bringing this to my attention so that I can further study and educate myself and make sure that I'm well informed about really what's going on. So I'm going to play this video and then we can discuss it a little further.
Seemingly antithetical to Western ideas and values and freedoms. And he says, well, it's very useful. In fact, he says the British Empire, I can give you 5 reasons why. He says they were anti-communist, so they could be utilized as this, proxy force. He says they were viewed as conservative muscle just by the establishment. I don't think it's actually conservative, but he says they're a destabilizing force as a proxy army and thus their political tools. And so what's the purpose of it? Well, he says the purpose is oil, energy, and strategic control. It's that simple. So
and you brainwash them and you got people ready to blow themselves up. So let me show you this article. This is out of the Israeli newspapers, jns.org. Israel wins stunning 12-day war. And when you read the article, towards the end, it says Israel basically is in control of the United States, and it now is the superpower because of that. And we get into this planetary system saying, out of what we do here, we will form the new global consensus. The Jewish state as an emerging superpower, not just in the region, but on the world stage. So this is a long-term plan that literally follows the revelation. They think they're using it as like some missionary protectorate, self-fulfilling prophecy. That's their delusion. What is this?
The master plan is to eventually demonize all nation states, the idea of the nation state, and then we've got to have centralized technocratic global rulerships and city states, mega cities, and probably Jerusalem will be one, or Tel Aviv, probably other places like
DC, City of London, Vatican.
Exactly. And that when we have this global notion, and that's why it's important to look and see that New York's now getting a Fabian socialist mayor get in, this Islamic socialist. It's like, this is all, but it's the exact same thing they did in London. They put Islamic socialist mayors in who are open Fabian socialists. It's the Fabian socialist plan that they said, we will flood the West with Islam. They said it 100+ years ago. All the Fabian elites said
the
that.
Kalergi plan.
The Kalergi plan is to destroy the indigenous European stock, turn them into a big glob, and then it will be amenable to technocracy. Absolutely.
The government fears Alex Jones, who has the largest audience in the country, bigger than any of the networks, the biggest megaphone in the country.
The deep state hates Alex Jones with a vengeance.
Alex Jones is the most extraordinary person I've ever met.
All right, Jay Dyer is an amazing researcher, best-selling author, talk show host, good friend of mine for a long time. And I knew his wife, never dated her, she's a beautiful woman though, like 25, 26 years ago in Austin with a TV show she hosted on Access TV. So that's how long I've known this guy. So amazing. And he's an expert on the different globalist systems fit into each other, how it operates. I got him to call in a few days ago to give his take on things. I want to give his latest update on what's happening, where he sees this all going. Major pre-programming for false flags be blamed on Iran. I mean, this is all such an amazing time. And then major cities in Europe, London, you name it, now New York said to be taken over by a communist Islamist. That's major foreshadowing. So this deep relationship with the satanic globalist order in Islam for some ultimate goal with their plan. You're like, well, wait, if the Islam's bad in the big.
Sorry, you guys, that was not the right video. I was like, wait a minute. That's not the right video I wanted to use. Okay, let me get the correct video that I wanted to use because it's a little bit shorter. But that definitely sets up what we're going to get into, right? I really want you guys to see this because it's important.
A researcher for them, but he's also very honest and very critical of this approach. And so he...
Okay, let me pause, Jay, again, really quick before we get more into it. So there are some books that he's going to reference, and I do have the website to those books that we will get into. I'm kind of glad that the video did play the way it played because we did need to see that, you know, Jerusalem, Israel, they are setting themselves up as a nation state on the world stage. And like I said, this is a lot deeper than what we see playing out in the media. And so I just wanted to give a different perspective outside of legacy media and even some new media, right? Because like I told you, I'm fighting to make sure that I do not give you guys any propaganda and that you are getting a segment of the news that you can use in your life properly just to navigate and just to know. And if you need to do further research, you can. So here I'm gonna put it up full screen for you guys so we can get more into this perspective from Jay's analysis.
Wrote a book, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago called Secret Affairs, Britain's Collusion with Radical Islam. And the first thing he says is that, well, why would the West want to utilize something that's seemingly antithetical to Western ideas and values and freedoms? And he says, well, it's very useful. In fact, he says, the British Empire, I can give you 5 reasons why. He says they were anti-communist, so they could be utilized as this, proxy force. He says they were viewed as conservative muscle just by the establishment. I don't think it's actually conservative, but he says they're a destabilizing force as a proxy army, and thus their political tools. And so what's the purpose of it? Well, he says the purpose is oil, energy, and strategic control. It's that simple. So,
and we get into this planetary system saying, out of what we do here, we will form the new global consensus. The Jewish state is an emerging superpower, not just in the region, but on the world stage. So this is a long-term plan that literally follows the revelation. They think they're using it as like some missionary protectorate, self-fulfilling prophecy. That's their delusion.
What radical, but in the modern era, we do get more secular and toned down versions, I guess you could say, with say Assad or Baathists, etc. But if you go back to the 1940s, for example, the Muslim Brotherhood, as it gained prominence in Egypt, which was a reformist movement to become return to sort of the more radical strands. They were opposed to the Ottoman approach to Islam. The British Empire thought that this would actually be a great ally to have to utilize for destabilization operations. And so in the 1940s, according to Curtis, basically the British Empire tried to buy off the entire Muslim Brotherhood. They may not have been successful in buying it off, but they at least began to heavily fund it in the 1940s. And if you remember, we covered Miles Copeland, the famous CIA operative's book Game of Nations. Miles Copeland talks about in the 1940s and 50s that that even the CIA was very happy to utilize the Muslim Brotherhood for certain types of operations. So remember, radical Islam is it is an enemy of the West, but it's a controlled, allowed, and promoted enemy of the West. And it's not really the enemy that most people think, the way that people think. People think of it like Al-Qaeda hit us on 9/11 and we got to fight against all the Muslims in Iraq. And of course, Saddam, Iraq, they had nothing to do with 9/11. But that was part of the Seven Nations strategy that Wesley Clark talked about. That would be what we would be doing for the next several decades when he talked about that, 20, 25 years ago. That Pentagon strategy, which is the neoconservative foreign policy strategy, especially for the Middle East, was precisely to utilize terror networks, to utilize proxy militaries, to utilize what was once Al-Qaeda and now ISIS, etc., al-Nusra in Syria. These destabilization efforts required and were necessary, not just for Israel. Turkey also plays a role in this. Turkey played a role in helping and supporting a lot of these radical movements and these little tiny schismatic factions in toppling and taking over these countries because, again, the CIA had adopted a strategy after the 1940s and 50s that was anti-secular Islam and anti-pan-Arabism. They were not able to get the people groups of the Middle East, especially the Arab people groups, to have any kind of alliance. It was so tribal and so divided that the imperial strategy, whether it was the Brits, whether it was the CIA in the 1940s and 50s, they decided that scrap it. It's much more effective to utilize the proxy cutout skeleton key of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And ISIS comes out of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is the warriors and the fighters, the Mujahideen, that were utilized in 1979 in Afghanistan. And the base is where we get Al-Qaeda from. The base was a base where bin Laden and his mentors trained in the 1979 conflict against the Soviets in Afghanistan. So it's literally like the Rolodex of the Mujahideen fighters that go on to become the very useful enemies of America and American freedoms. In fact, the day of the planes, which was the pre-9/11 planning that would go into what we know of as 9/11, all of those individuals originally discussing the, quote, day of the planes, as they called it, those were some of the original Mujahideen fighters that were known to be on this Rolodex, on this list, right, of fighters that could be used in any of these sort of conflicts. The airlift of evil, they could fly them in and out of Pakistan and Afghanistan. And again, Pakistan plays a key role in this as well because money was sent on to General Mahmoud, $100,000 wired right before 9/11. That's all on record. Biden talked about it, ironically, and if I recall, I think Luke Rudowski and Jason Burmas have even quizzed and asked Biden about this at some point. And of course, Biden always gives this contradictory information on what was going on with this money and whether they knew the ISI, Pakistani ISI, had this money wired to them and all that. So they've been caught actually lying about this many times. But the point is that Pakistan is also another one of these British imperial creations. It's a nation created and carved up out of the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the rise of England, and to try to maintain and control that power structure. And the American Pax America, the Pax Americana, the American Empire, essentially adopted that exact same thing. One of these operations you could look up, for example, that I mentioned in terms of utilizing the Muslim Brotherhood is Operation Straggle. This was the Muslim Brotherhood together with British intelligence and the CIA being used to get a conflict going even in the 1940s. And Operation Straggle is mentioned again on this on page 78 of Curtis's book. To fast forward to prove that it's the exact same thing going on today. I remember in 2014, I started writing and talking about what was going on in Syria, and I'm certainly no expert on Syria, but I wrote a lot of articles and talked a lot about how it looked like the West was funding and was moving towards toppling Assad and trying to put in a radical Islamic extreme Sunni, Salafi thing there. And what was funny was that in 2014, everybody would call you crazy, even though in 2011 or 12 on the CFR website, they had an article that was up that was literally titled, "Why We Need Al-Qaeda in Syria." So the CFR could literally write public articles about it. You can still find it on the Wayback Machine. And if you talked about what the CFR said word for word, the normies and the majority of the people out there would call you crazy conspiracy theorist, even though you're literally just citing what's on the CFR website. But then the CFR doesn't exist, and that's not a real thing, and who cares, right? And yet what happens, fast forward to 2017, and what was just declassified about 8 months ago, the New York Times, Timber Sycamore. We even know the name of the actual operation in Syria to try to topple Assad, and it was billions of US dollar tax money put from, I think, 2014 up to 2017, 18, somewhere in there, to topple Assad. CIA operation together, obviously, with Israel, to topple Assad. Billions of our tax dollars going to do this. We talked about it. I wrote about it, did podcasts on it, 2014, 15, 16. Oh, you're crazy. It doesn't exist. There's no Western aid and funding to ISIS and al-Nusra. The Syrian rebels are moderate rebels. They're good. What are you talking about? It's crazy. Oh, and now we know the name of it, Timber Sycamore. If you look up on the New York Times, look up Timber Sycamore, it's all right there. Has anyone apologized? No, nobody said, sorry, Jay, you were actually correct. It was obvious because they do the same things that they've always done. It's the same strategy that they always do. I knew about it because I read this book too, by Robert Dreyfuss, Devil's Game. It's the same strategy. Billions of dollars, declassified. It's in the New York Times 7 months ago. It ended supposedly in 2017 because it wasn't working. Now, eventually, it did work because they did topple Assad. And they just bombed a big Orthodox church. Suicide bomber went it, bombs a giant Orthodox church a couple of days ago in Syria. So why do we want radical Muslims running things? Why in 1967 would the West give $2 billion to these groups, to the Muslim Brotherhood? It's to try to buy them off and to try to run them and to try to control them, to use them as a proxy force, a proxy army. And who do they produce, these groups? Bin Laden. These groups produce people like Osama bin Laden. And you might think, well, again, but see, these are like the enemies of the West, aren't they? Well, they're the best enemies that money can buy because they're absolutely necessary, useful enemies. Attacks on the base. There it is. Yeah. Anti-Soviet warrior. Such an awesome, radical, cool dude. So this is only like a year or two away from the greatest villain in all history. He's the he's calls America the great Satan. But he's a very useful tool. And even into the 1990s, when the Al-Qaeda networks and groups are now the great enemy of America, they're still being used by the Clinton administration in Serbia and Kosovo. The KLA is the same groups and the same people. To overthrow Milosevic, it's a proxy force again. And the KLA is this sort of concocted fake thing where you have radical Marxist ideas together people trained around do the same stuff. It's amazing. And you start realizing this, and it's like, wait a minute. So the enemies are our friends, and then they're our enemies, and then they're friends again, and they're enemies again. Something about it doesn't make sense. Oh, 1984 is actually about this. If you read 1984, that's exactly his point. Is that this back and forth between the good guy, bad guy, good guy, this is a very useful strategy for world control. I'm trying to find this chapter where he talks about, yeah, here it is. NATO uses Al-Qaeda in the 1990s. Now remember, these are the bad guys who were just previously the good guys during the Cold War, heroes. Ronald Reagan has the Mujahideen in the White House, famously in those mid-80s pictures. And so the CIA and NATO decide, well, we got to get rid of Milosevic because we want to make sure that these the Caucasus, this region, is going to be transitioned out of the Soviet collapse and into IMF and World Bank neoliberal garbage of the West. How do we do that? Well, let's use the Kosovo Liberation Army, and we'll train them. We'll have Al-Qaeda come in. Al-Zawahiri's brother, Al-Zawahiri, one of the key Al-Qaeda operatives, number, 2 or 3 in Al-Qaeda, supposedly back then. He literally is running an entire Kosovo Liberation Unit. These are cutouts. These are fake groups. And all of these people and all these strategies are only benefiting the oligarchy in America and in the West. And that includes Israel too. These oligarchs are the ones that are benefiting. The people are not. We send our sons and daughters off to go and die for these foreign wars that benefit corporations and, yes, Israel too. Now people are figuring this out. Oh, actually, why are we all supposed to go die for Israel? Well, because it's God's chosen people, like Ted Cruz says when he failed in that debate with Tucker. Didn't even know the argument as to, well, why would a atheist nation state created in 1948 that has no explicit reference at all to Christianity whatsoever, why would that have anything to do with the promises in Genesis 12, which Paul says in Galatians 3 apply to Christians? If you read Galatians 3, the promises of Genesis 12, 15, 17, and 22 are not to a atheist created nation state in 1948 or 1917. They're promises to those baptized into Christ. Literally the entire purpose of Galatians 3. That's the Israel of God according to Galatians. Galatians 6:16, peace be upon you, the Israel of God, the church at Galatia. Matthew 21:43, when Jesus gives the parable, he says, the kingdom of God will be taken from you and given to a nation producing the fruits thereof. That's the church. The church is the spiritual nation. Peter says in 1 Peter 2, you are a chosen nation, a royal priesthood. The promises that were previously to the flesh state of Israel are now transferred to the church, which is the kingdom of God. The entire book of Hebrews is pointing out that those promises are now to those baptized into Christ, not to an unbelieving group of political Zionists and atheists. Those promises are not to those people. They're only in Christ, who is the capital seed, S, seed in Galatians 3. Genesis 12, the promise to Abraham and to his seed. Paul says, I will explain that for you, Christian world, and all the other world. the seed in Genesis 12, 15, 17, and 22 is Jesus the Messiah. He is the seed, capital S, seed, not seeds plural. In fact, Paul even says he does not say seeds as plural. So it's not Jews, unbelieving Jews, and Jesus. That would be seeds plural. Can you hear me, evangelical boomers? I'm talking to you. Seed, capital S. So the only promise is if you're baptized in Christ. Otherwise, as Hosea prophesied, there is a divorce. I will give you a bill of divorce. Unbelieving Israel, you get a bill of divorce. Hebrews 13, the people that serve at the earthly tabernacle and temple don't have a right to eat at our altar. Hebrews 13, the Christian Eucharistic altar. Because he's talking about contrasting their eating of the animals and our eating of the sacrifice of Christ in Hebrews 13, clear as day. But Americans have been sold via the Scofield Bible, via the Oxford Imperial Press, pushing this idiot ideology of dispensationalism into America, the idea that the real church is actually just the atheist nation state of Israel. And because much of the evangelical Zionist world divorced itself from anything remotely in terms of historical Christianity.
Well, I just believe my Bible.
Yeah, but the Bible was put together by a historic group of people called a church. It doesn't fall out of heaven into your lap.
I believe in King James Bible.
Yeah, but King James was a monarch. You don't believe in monarchs? What are you talking about, evangelical?
I believe in King James. King James was a monarch appointed by God.
You don't believe in monarchs. I've never heard an evangelical talk about believing in monarchs. But you believe that King James gave you the Bible? This is idiocy. This is why you get used by people who send your sons and daughters off to die for atheist nation states, because you're goofy. You're goobers. You're goofy goobers, like SpongeBob says.
I'm a goofy goober. I want to die for Israel. I'm a goofy goober.
We gotta have subways in Iraq. We gotta have abortion and vaccines everywhere. That's what God wants. He wants that. No, the church, the historic church, is Israel. And that's what everybody in Christianity believed until the creation of dispensationalism out of John Nelson Darby and C.I. Scofield. And what do you know? That project just happens to support the idea of the creation of the nation state of Israel, whether it's the Balfour Declaration or whether it's 1948. And that's why Samuel Untermeyer in America was a big promoter and pusher of this Scofield dispensationalist Bible. And now a giant portion of American evangelicals have been duped by this, and they have no idea how divorced this is from actual historic Christianity, which never taught this. No rapture nonsense. Well, Paul says in First Thessalonians that we'll be called up to the heavens. That's talking about the last day, the resurrection. There's nothing in there about a rapture before the tribulation. It's just the second coming. That's it. Where was dispensationalism prior to Scofield and Darby and the push by Oxford University to send this dumb Bible into America to dupe and to brainwash all the evangelicals, which was very successful, very successful. And then you got people like John Hagee, who basically parrot and push this whole thing, millions of dollars through Kufi and all that stuff, which is his whole thing to promote. People don't remember this, but John Hagee had years ago, about 10, 15 years ago, a book come out called Jesus is Not the Messiah. It was such a scandal he had to take it down and get rid of the book. By my new book, In Defense of Israel, Jesus is not the Messiah. The blood moons of the 7 gold bowl judgments of 1948, blah, blah, blah. All this nonsense has nothing to do with what the book of Revelation is actually about, right? John says, the beginning of the book, these things are soon to come to pass. Jesus says in Luke 21, you will not see one stone on top. You will see, you, my audience, standing in front of me, this destroyed. Guess what? That happened in 70 AD. Okay. I think that does talk about all the end of the world. But Luke 21 makes it very clear that what's being discussed in the Olivet Discourse of Matthew 24, that happened in 70 AD. It's the destruction of Jerusalem. The book of Revelation even identifies the city. It's the city where our Lord was crucified. I wonder what it's talking about. Talk about the Vatican. No, it's not talking about the Vatican. I think the Vatican is a horrible, evil institution. But it literally says it's the city spiritually called Sodom and Egypt where our Lord was crucified. It's Jerusalem. It's Israel. John is describing that Rome the beast, will destroy the whore, Israel, both of whom colluded to crucify Christ. So, I mean, if Americans want to be idiots and they want to buy into idiocy in terms of theology and end times nonsense, much of which is actually geopolitical propaganda to get you to fight what the wars that Ted Cruz and Netanyahu want. And that's exactly what we've been doing since 9/11, or even before that, for the last 25, 30 years, the neoconservative agenda, which absolutely loves all of this Israel worship stuff and the evangelical nonsense. Until people see through that, America will never get out of the stranglehold. This is overlooked. People think, well, it's just politics. If we get on here and argue politics, I don't want to get into religion. I don't want to. Yeah, but religion is the stronghold, the stranglehold on the majority of the conservative American mindset to worship an atheist nation state, which is not what the Bible's talking about. And there's so many passages in the New Testament that talk about this, so many teachings of the ancient church, the church fathers talk about this. It's really kind of wild that anybody would fall for this. I fell for it. When I was 19, I used to read John Hagee's Prophecy Study Bible. I thought that was right. I didn't know any better. Went to a Christian bookstore. I bought the Prophecy Study Bible. And I thought all these dispensationalist charts and all this stuff was, and then the more I read the Bible, it's like, there's not really a dual covenant theology. Like the New Testament's pretty clear. Paul says that all of the covenant promises are in Christ. There's not a separate track of, well, there's all these promises to an atheist nation state over here, but then there's all these other promises to Jesus, and God has plan B and plan C because this dispensation didn't work, so he's got to start again. And no, there's always only been one way to be saved, and that's in Christ. And that's why there's not three Abrahamic faiths. According to Galatians 3, there's only Christ. Abraham worshiped Jesus. In John 8, Jesus says that it's John 5-9. Read all those chapters where Jesus argues with the Pharisees. He's arguing that all the Old Testament saints believed and wrote about him. And that's why the Pharisees want to stone him. Because the Pharisees don't believe that. You're just a man. How could you have been there in, with Abraham? And Jesus is saying, who did Abraham eat with? Who did Moses eat with on top of the mountain? Me. It's not God the Father, it's the Father. Who is this angel Lord they were meeting with? It's Jesus. That's the angel Lord. That destroys all this stupid dispensational nonsense that has a stranglehold on the American religious mindset. If you want to follow me, you can go to jasonelsis.com and subscribe. If you want to get my books, you can go to the shop there and get signed copies, and follow me on YouTube and Twitter.
Mike is muted. Sorry about that. So, hey guys, thank you so much for just, hanging in there for it's a very long video, but I really liked his analysis and the detail that he gave, and also some of the background he gave on Christianity, right? And how, it's being used, right? Religion is being used to put us into this proxy war situation that we have now. We always talk about the religious wars that are going on, in the Middle East, and some people's attitude is like, let them deal with it. And they do need to deal with it. But what they need to do is take religion off of it, right? Because, what Jay was saying was pretty spot on, pretty spot on. They're using religion as a way to stay into these wars. So we're going to take a quick break, And when we come back, we will have our special guest from Mighty Men Thursday, Torraine Walker. Thank you so much for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News.
At All Sides, we believe unbiased news doesn't exist. To get more clicks and make more money, media outlets often report news with a left, right, or sensational slant, either to suit their own agenda or because by telling us what we want to hear, we'll come back for more. Several news outlets in the center do a good job of portraying both sides equitably, but for the most part, American news media is biased. Bias isn't necessarily a bad thing. The key is to get multiple perspectives. But making matters worse, social media and internet search results are heavily filtered, showing us the most popular opinion or results that match our preferences and make us happy. That means we're all living in filter bubbles, where we're only exposed to viewpoints we already agree with, making us less informed and less tolerant of different people and ideas. At All Sides, we give bias ratings for hundreds of media outlets. By freeing people from filter bubbles and providing different perspectives, we can all be better equipped to understand the world and each other. So how do we do it? All Sides has created a patented, fair, transparent process to rate the media bias of hundreds of news outlets and writers. We assess each media source and rate them as far left, center, lean right, or far right, allowing you to quickly identify different perspectives. All Sides is constantly evolving our media bias engine. The more you participate, the better our ratings will be, and the better our news coverage will be. Go to allsides.com to get involved.
And thank you so much for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered, 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Dr. Shakinoni Nichols, and today is Mighty Men Thursday. Thank you guys for joining us. And so we have a very special guest. His name is Torraine Walker. He is I want to say more reporter and an author, and he is joining us here on Mighty Men Thursday. So let me bring him to the stage. Hey, Torraine, how are you?
Good morning. How are you doing? I'm fine.
Good. I can hear you. Okay. Can you hear me?
Hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good. I always try to make sure, because there are times when technology is technologizing and I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm dealing with that myself.
I should say that. So thank you so much for joining us here this morning. So if you could give just a brief introduction about yourself, what you're doing in the community, where people can follow you, and then we'll get into a topic of your choice.
Well, yeah. Well, hello to your audience. My name is Torraine Walker. I am a writer. I'm a journalist. I'm a content creator. I'm also a brand strategist, and I consider myself a digital storyteller. My background is in journalism, but I moved from mainstream journalism to independent journalism about 4 or 5 years ago. Have a company, Context Media, and I also basically give my commentary on news shows and things like that, and talk about things in the political sphere. You can find me on Twitter, probably more than I need to be, Torraine Walker. You can also go to TorraineWalker.com, which is my website, so you can see all the work I do and on my bylines.
Okay, nice, nice. So I know that there was an article that you wrote on June 16th, and it talks about how Black America owes you nothing. I didn't know if you wanted to discuss that or if there was another topic you'd like to get into.
No, that's a perfect topic.
Okay.
I wrote the article, yeah, right up before Juneteenth. The title is "Black America Owes You Nothing," and I wrote that in the response from a lot of activists who were out protesting in Los Angeles and in New York and other cities because of Trump's anti-immigration policy. And the reason I wrote it is because there seems to be this automatic expectation that Black um, people should automatically jump onto whatever bandwagon of whatever people are protesting are against the system. And I understand where that comes from because historically, Black people have been the vanguard of social justice movements and civil rights movements. But I wrote the article because we can't really have that without talking about the inherent anti-Blackness in a lot of Latino communities. A lot of people who are all out there and all in for some of Trump's anti-Latino, anti-immigration policies, also have a history of making anti-Black statements and saying anti-Black comments in their home countries and here. So I wrote the article to say that before you come and demand that Black people get on your side, you need to deal with the anti-Blackness in your ranks before you expect us to do that. So that's what it was about. And it got, I'd say the response was 50-50. A lot of people loved the article because they felt like it was something that needed to be said. A lot of people had pushback against it because they didn't want to really address those issues. But it got the issues on the table and people are talking about it. So that's why I wrote it.
Yeah, good. And I'm glad you did, because sometimes we need to be a little bit uncomfortable to get to the other side, right? Because it is something that needs to be dealt with, because, I do have Hispanic people that I know, and I need people to understand that just because someone says the Latin community, it's almost like Latin flatness, like Black flatness. You know what I'm saying? It's like somebody from the Dominican Republic, if you called them Mexican, they would have a whole fit, right? Because it's a completely different country with a completely different culture, even though they are Latin. And to Doreen's point, a lot of these people don't like Black people. Like, we are the scum of the earth to them. And, they're here, and a lot of them are in Los Angeles, here illegally, and they're suffering a lot because people aren't showing up to work, But is that our fault? Is that our cause, I should say? And I'm glad that you definitely brought that up. So what do you think about what's happening, the aftermath that's happening, like people not showing up to work, construction sites, not full of people? I'm like, well, you ran everybody else off that was there. Now you're going to have to pay them. So what do you think?
Well, no, I mean, tied into what you just said, look, a lot of the manual labor done in this country is done by Latinos, and a lot of them are illegal immigrants. That happens. But I also think while that needs to be addressed, I think something that's being overlooked is the fact that a lot of these people don't get here and they're not able to find employment if it's not for companies who are willing to hire them because they can pay them under the table. They don't have to do any paperwork. And every time you've seen an ICE rate, it's always on the lowest bottom rung of the people who are out there, who are the people who just got here, or the people who are working for minimum wage or below minimum wage. You haven't seen a CEO be walked out of an office building yet. And that's where the root of the problem is. You know what I mean? So while we do have to deal with the anti-Blackness in Latino communities, if we're talking about the larger economic background for why this is happening, it starts at these companies that are willing to skirt the law to be able to hire these people in the first place, because that's where they're coming in.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, as consumers, what do we do? Right? Because obviously there are some products that people want. And sometimes, I won't say need, but a house is nice to have. I'm just saying. And if you're having your house built right now, or if you've bought something maybe in a new development that's coming up, that people aren't showing up to work because they're afraid of getting deported, right? Okay, great. They're here illegally. Why aren't you reaching out to American citizens that have the qualifications to do the jobs? And it's because you don't want to pay them. You've gotten greedy. And to me, it's more greed than it is really wanting to get the job done.
Well,
I
a
mean,
corporation, especially in the United States, the profit motive and the bottom line is always the deciding factor of everything. But in my opinion, it seems like it would make more sense, just from a legal standpoint, just to keep yourself out of a situation, to say that, okay, there are skilled laborers in America who are out of work. There are a lot of Black people in America who are out of work, especially for the unemployment rate, if we're talking about Black men who could do those jobs. The issue is when you hire an American citizen, there is a lot of paperwork that you have to do, and there is a
yeah.
minimum baseline wage that you have to pay. And even in construction tends to be even a really good paying job. There's very few construction jobs that start at less than $20 an hour. Now it's hard work, it is backbreaking work, but it is work, and it pays a whole lot better for an American citizen than for somebody who's illegal. And then because then you have to pay in the workman's comp, you have to pay in the unemployment. I understand that. But in the long run, you're getting a worker who is actually, first of all, legal to be here and legal to work. So it really saves you in the long run. But they're looking at the short-term profit motive without realizing that eventually, because of these protests and because of the public scrutiny that's on this, eventually you're going to start seeing raids in offices and everything, and somebody's going to get walked out. Now, that's going to happen. Now, in the meantime, wouldn't it make sense to hire somebody who's already here, who's willing to work?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that, I guess that's the problem that I have with it because, to your point, we have people here and it's heartbreaking because they want to say, Americans are lazy and no, Americans are not lazy. Businesses want to pay other people slave labor. They do. They want to pay slavery wages to people, and they don't want to pay an actual salary to an American citizen because you know what that comes with, to your point, workers' comp. They will also have to pay the unemployment insurance if that person, does get unemployed. They're also going to have to pay insurance, right? Just the medical insurance cost to make sure that those employees are okay. And I'm just like, what is wrong with you? You can pay them as a contractor, right? Where you say, okay, you're responsible for X, Y, and Z, and you're coming here to this job site as an independent contractor, which in my opinion actually creates a better situation for that worker because then they can write everything off, right?
Hmm.
But nobody's
No,
really looking at it that way.
yeah, because again, and it's not just in construction. It's like most of the manual physical labor jobs where you have to put your hand to a tool or you have to physically deal with the public. A lot of these jobs are being staffed by people who are legal because again, it all ties back to the economic motive. It is actually in the short term, it's economically beneficial for a CEO to hire somebody who doesn't have documentation because one of two things. There's the economic motive, and there's also the fact that you can hire those people to do very risky jobs without fear of them having any kind of recourse because they can't go to the EOC,
Right.
they can't go to the state because the first thing
Hmm.
they're going to do, especially in the climate now, is they're going to be the first place they go is going to be in the back of an ice truck, and they know that.
Right.
Employers
Right.
know that, and they know that they can hire those people, like I said, to do very hazardous jobs, and nothing can really happen outside of the body being there.
Right. And that's the sad part. It's like, okay, when did we start getting back into it? Slavery is okay. Because it's slavery. I don't care how you cut it. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
When you're basically saying that people are expendable.
yeah, well, I don't want to necessarily compare it to slavery because slavery was far more brutal than what they're dealing with now. But
Right.
I think a better analogy is sort of like before Teddy Roosevelt enacted a lot of the child labor laws in the early 1900s, where you
Mm,
had children working in mills and in coal
right.
mines and things like that. Is that sort of thing where it's like there's no
Okay.
protections, there's absolutely no basis for safety of the worker. And if you get killed in a mine or you lose an arm in a mill, then you just have to go out there and beg with a cup. That's what we're heading back to. We're heading back to almost like serfdom in this country. And
Mm,
the
okay.
crazy thing about this is, again, if you are an employer, it makes more sense to have a healthy, stable workforce that doesn't have to look over its shoulder. And also,
Right.
it makes more sense for an employer to have stopgaps in place and safety protocols in place. So if something does happen, there's a way out of this situation for a worker. But the majority of people don't care about their workers. They only care about the profit motive and however they can get it. So be it. Unfortunately, that's what we deal with.
Yeah, yeah. And there's also, the regulations that come into play, right? That employers don't want to have to get into. And then to that, it's like, okay, well, let's look at some of these regulations they have. To your point, they do keep employees safe. But to another point, it almost backs up employers to where they're like, I want to just get this done and I don't want to have to go through all of the paperwork, right? But to your point, until we start getting some perk walks, and up to the CEOs, because it needs to fall on their shoulders, not the person that may have hired them, in the HR department, right? It needs to go all the way up to the C-suite, and they need to start being arrested because it's like at a certain juncture, it falls on your shoulders. You've made the ultimate decision that this is okay to hire people here illegally. Because guess what? The houses still need to be built. The work still needs to get done. So you're going to have to open this up to people that are American citizens and pay them the wages that you're supposed to pay them. And guess what? People can actually understand you when you speak English to them and say, hey, I need this done a certain way, as opposed to trying to explain to somebody who has no idea what you're saying to them, and then houses fall apart. I've heard about people's houses falling apart after being built, by the way, by people
Oh no,
that are not here from this country.
no, it's a thing. I've seen situations where normally what happens, they will hire somebody who's bilingual, and they
Hmm.
end up becoming sort of like an
Interpreter.
unofficial, yeah, it's sort of like an unofficial foreman. It's like whoever's building the house
Right.
will interpret the instructions, then the person who's bilingual will tell the workers and everything, and it kind of goes about like that.
But still, there's got to be a way around this nonsense. But I did want to get your take on the, I want to say he's the nominee for the Democratic Party in New York for mayor, and he actually beat out Cuomo. Now, my conspiracy theory is that they actually put Cuomo in the race so that this person could win, and that it brought kind of like a light to the race. Because if Cuomo wasn't in it, in my opinion, would anybody even know that the mayoral race was even going on, right? For the primary, just my opinion.
Well, New York is one of those states where, because there's so much media there, anything that happens politically in New York goes out to the rest of the country, just like California and Florida.
Right.
Um, I don't really necessarily think that's true, because I think what happens is the Democratic establishment is very, very concerned with keeping their people in place, no matter what transgressions they may have had. Cuomo is a known entity in the Democratic Party, which is why I think they backed him so much. And I think the fact that Madani, I hope I'm not butchering his name,
Mhm.
won was sort of an upset for the establishment Democratic Party in New York. Because here's the thing: the Democratic Party is in free fall right now. People who are inside the Democratic Party have admitted as such, and knowing how much of a tight ship they keep on information and how much they love to serve the narrative that the Democratic Party is fine, the fact that people are deflecting from the Democratic Party and running away from it and going on, basically going on tour with books saying that we know that Biden was incapacitated 18 months ago, but we kept it pushing. We're rudderless. We don't have any sort of, we don't know where we're going. I think they wanted Cuomo in because he would give them some sort of stability and they could build around him. The fact that he won is also a fact, ties into the fact that a lot of the Democratic constituency is just tired. They're tired of the status quo. They're tired of the same old, and I think that's why he won. Now, here's the thing: I think what happens is also as much free fall and disarray as the Democratic Party is in, they are very, very good at co-opting grassroots movement. From what I've seen, Mandami sort of like comes from the grassroots. He comes from that sort of tradition of AOC. He's a charismatic person. He has a really strong personality. He reads really well on video. He's really good on the stump, and he's really good in talk show situations. My concern is, once he does, if he gets into power, the Democratic establishment is going to send their people to him to start corralling some of his quote unquote more radical points of view. The same way they did with AOC, because when AOC came into Congress, she came in on the wave of the people who were just grown up because Bernie didn't win. And she brought in the
Mhm.
progressive left of the party. And the minute she walked into the house, the first person to greet her there was Pelosi and Schumer and everybody else, to basically get her in line and use her as a figurehead for the rest of the young left. And I don't know. I think people are aware of that because AOC is dealing with that now. A lot of people, she has disillusioned a lot of people. And I think a lot of people are going to have Mandami under far more scrutiny. And the very first second that he does something that steps outside of what he promised in his campaign, I think he could end up becoming a lame duck before he even takes office. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, like I said, it's very interesting because I'm like, he's a self-proclaimed socialist and I was just like, okay, socialism never went well for anybody anywhere. I'm just saying, it
Well,
doesn't.
it depends on how you practice it. I mean, if you, the way the socialist model in Scandinavia works really well, but because they have such a strong social safety net, it's able to work. In a country like the United States, when you have so much capitalist interest here, it can be
Yeah,
tricky, especially in a city like New York. You know,
yeah,
I mean, there's always most governments have some form of capitalism and socialism working one way or
right.
the other. It's just that you can't have too much of one and too much of the other. So I just
Hmm.
depends on what it is. And if you have buzzwords that are running with people, they automatically jump up and they start screaming and everything. We'll
Yeah,
see.
because
I don't know.
he's talking about like free childcare, and I'm like, okay, well, somebody's got to pay for it because nothing is free. So you're either going to have to raise taxes, and people are already overtaxed, right? But there's a lot of things you got to clean up. Like the subway needs to be cleaned up, period. And even the governor tried to put it off on Amtrak, and I'm like, wait a minute. You're getting money to clean this up and you're not cleaning it up. It's not getting any better. Like seriously, like something needs to be done. Like I feel bad for New York. It's crazy.
Yeah. like I said, I don't know enough about New York to really comment on everything going on. I just know as far as like the larger Democratic establishment, um, they're like I said, they're in disarray. And it's going to be interesting to see how they introduce him to their system and see what that looks like.
Yeah, yeah, because he was kind of, he's being propped. I won't say propped up as like a rock star in that instance, but that's kind of in my opinion, the way they're doing his campaign, right? Setting
Yeah.
him up in that type of rock star status where people will give him the attention and he's, going viral. Apparently, his mother works with Disney, and so he's done some projects with Disney. So there's, money flowing in from there. So this isn't, in my opinion, yeah, you're grassroots, but you have money. It's kind of like Vivek Ramaswamy, right? Like,
Mm.
yeah, he was grassroots, but he still had $10 million. A lot of people that are grassroots don't have $10 million to get started. Just saying.
Well, yeah, just speaking as somebody who does branding and everything, there is that sort of thing goes a lot farther in politics because you know what did they say? The old joke is like politics is Hollywood for ugly people, and it's like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the people who work
Yeah,
in politics they tend to be bland and colorless and everything like that. So when you find somebody who has sort of like some charisma and cachet, whether it's Gavin Newsom on the West Coast or whether it's
right,
like even somebody like a Bernie who was older but he still had that cachet because he was riding on the shoulders of the young people, or especially like AOC, just because of the way they look, that's going to carry them a lot further through politics than it will anywhere else. Like Obama or like a Kennedy. When you get somebody like that, the parties latch onto them and they put them in that status, because there's so
right.
few of them in there.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And you would think at this juncture in our political spectrum that people would kind of see past things and really listen to what people are saying and putting forth. But to your point, they get distracted and they get caught up in the looks and the glitz and the glamour and the flashy things. And it's like, okay, really, we're just gonna do this shiny new toy situation and not really look at what they're saying and what they actually really want to do. Or like, are you guys really listening to what this person wants to do? It's that part, getting voters to realize like, yeah, there are consequences to your votes as much as there are, good things that come with your vote, depending on who you vote for.
Well, the other thing too is, and I talk about this a lot of times people see their civic duty as voting and then they go home. And
Hmm.
that's not really on the parties, that's on the individual. And if you really want to affect change, you have to start showing up to things outside of your vote. Um, you know, I think the last time I went to vote, well, I'll give this example. Um, the first time I voted in a presidential election was for Obama. I was deeply caught up in Obama and everything. And I remember getting up at 7 that morning to go vote.
Wow.
My polling place is like 3 blocks away at a school. I walked over there, and the line, by the time I could see it, before I got there, the line was out the door, down out the building, down the street, almost at the end of the block. It took me 2 hours to vote. The
Wow.
next time I voted was in a municipal election, and this was in Atlanta. It was like for city council, whatever. I walked in there like it was like a year later. There was like me, a couple of older white guys, an older black lady, and somebody who was in a wheelchair. Those local elections have far more impact on your personal life and your daily life than presidential elections. But because they're not cat flashy, they're not hip, and people don't pay attention to the issues, people don't show up to them and everything. And that's what I'm saying. You got to do more than that. You got to show up to city council meetings. You got to get petitions. You got to be more of a person that's going to be proactive in your community if your community needs something. People vote and go back home and get on the couch and fall asleep. And that's on the person.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of their hope. And I know that sounds sad, but that's kind of the hope of some of these parties. It's like, okay, we only need the people that are our majority to show up. Because if you don't show up, good for us, right? And, even with the Redemption Party, when we won our election, people say, it's a small town. Yes. And a lot of people didn't show up to vote, but they were just assuming that the Democratic Party would still win because we were a new party and we actually won in that election. We carry the majority in that city now, and I do pray that we continue to carry the majority and take care of that town. But to your point, you can't just look at the federal elections and get mad at the president. Like, why aren't things happening at the local level? Because that's not his job. It's your mayor's job. It's your councilman's job. It's your commissioner's job. It's your alderman's job. those are the people that you voted in. Your sheriff is somebody that you vote in. You vote in judges at the local level that actually affect your lives. So you have to get involved in politics. As much as people want to throw their hands up and, walk away, politics is all about you. I'm just saying, it never goes away. Okay, so what closing remarks do you have for our audience on this Mighty Men Thursday?
I would just say get more active. Even if you don't really agree, or even if you're not a fan of traditional politics, at least be aware enough of the issues going on your street, on your block, in your neighborhood, and see what kind of change you can affect there, and see how proactive you can be there. You know what I mean? Because those are the things that are going to deal with you're going to affect your daily lives. And if you live in the city, the majority of people who work in the city council, it's not, you don't have to go through the Secret Service and all these people to get to these people. A lot of these people have emails, they have phone numbers, obviously. And a lot of these people are walking around. Like I'm in Atlanta, our local council people walk around every day. There's ways you can get to people and just ask them what's important, and let them know what's important as well, and just be proactive that way. It's not that difficult. I think people believe politics has an extremely high barrier, and a lot of times it does. It's just as simple as walking up and asking.
Yeah. And, a lot of times those individuals are really willing to hear you and listen to you. They really are. To your point, it's not a high barrier, and we need to do better at having more of a conversation with our local politicians and not looking at them as small emperors that can't be touched, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. Now, how do I pronounce your name? Because to me, I pronounce it wrong.
No, it's all good. Everybody does. The way it's pronounced is torn. And the way I tell people, it's like torn, like foreign. Same pronunciation.
Oh, okay, so Torraine. So thank you so much, Torraine, for joining us here on Mighty Men Thursday. I'm looking forward to having you back, and definitely make sure you guys follow him on X at Torraine Walker. All right, I'll see you soon. Thank you. Yes, so I'm so grateful that Torraine got to join us this morning. I really respect just a lot of the work that he does in the community. Just as he said, just a long list of the things he does. So I'll definitely make sure when I repost this segment to add all of the links where you can find him on X, where he is mostly, and also on his website. So we're going to take a quick break, and I will see you guys on the other side. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern. My name is Dr. Ashaki Noni Nichols, and I wanted to thank Dr. C for reposting the stream, and also Sean AI, who is a filmmaker, and he's on X as well, reposting the stream. And thank you for everybody listening on Facebook and YouTube. So I wanted to go back into All Sides and look at, let me see if I get everything. Nope. I wanted to add this to the stage, not that. Remove that. Add that. There we go. I am my own producer and tech person, adding the right things or sometimes the wrong things to the stage. But I wanted to look at this article talking about how ICE arrests 11 Iranian nationals with criminal records suspected of terrorist ties. That's very scary. So it says U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement arrested 11 unauthorized Iranian nationals, sparking national security concerns. So here are the details that we know. The Department of Homeland Security announced the arrest Tuesday, which included a former Iranian army sniper and an individual with admitted connections to Hezbollah. Of the 11, several had previous criminal convictions, including drug and child abuse charges. However, DHS did not identify any credible threat tied to these individuals. The arrests are executed in multiple states, including Georgia, Texas, Arizona, Mississippi, Colorado, Minnesota, California, and New York. So that is crazy that these individuals were here of the 11. So the arrests come at a time of heightened national security concerns following airstrikes ordered by President Donald Trump, targeting key Iranian nuclear sites. Additionally, data reveals that more than 2,500 immigrants from Iran have been apprehended at the U.S.-Mexico border since 2021. So remember when I was talking a few days ago? Oh, hey, Unc, thank you so much for reposting the stream. But a few days ago, I was saying there are just not people from Mexico that are here illegally. And there are more than just people that came up through Mexico right here illegally. They just came up through the border, right? So this confirms what I said. I'm kind of glad for the confirmation. So I'm like, how are these people getting here? Well, they're coming up through the Mexico border. And then some people were also flown in as well. So this is how the media covered it. NBC News, which leans left bias, focused on the individual's criminal records and potential terrorist ties, while also highlighting the case of an Iranian asylum seeker who was seemingly arbitrarily taken into custody despite not having a criminal record. Okay. Why would they be seeking asylum in 2021 when there was nothing going on? You seek asylum because there's something going on, right? There's nothing going on. What do you, and why aren't you seeking asylum to the neighboring country? Why are you here? This needs to stop. This is crazy. Oh, that's so sweet. He said, "Good morning, my favorite news anchor." Well, good morning to you, sir. I'm glad I'm your favorite news anchor. Cool. I'll take it. I will take it. So it says, meanwhile, News Nation, which is center, emphasized the increase in national security concerns due to the number of migrants crossing the border from the Middle East, particularly Iran. So Vaz, which is right, questioned whether the arrested individuals were part of a larger terror network and criticized the Biden administration for endangering Americans with its open border policies. Yeah, all of those things. And, that clip that I played, and I'll make sure to put the full clip, right? Because I made a shorter version of it because it was close to an hour. But Alex Jones, he brought up, and a lot of people kept saying this, there might be an assassination attempt on President Trump, but it would be someone from Iran. And I know a long time ago, people were like, why are we talking about Iran? Why is it Iran even in this conversation? This was last year. Well, look at what we've got going on. These 11 individuals, they crossed the border around 2021. So between 2021 and 2024, they were living here amongst us. And here's the part that I'm grateful for. I'm grateful that ICE is doing their job. I'm grateful that, Tom Homan is like, we need 3,000, pretty much. I'm not sure if it's, I think it's monthly, might be, or it might be shorter than that. But, that's their goal. 3,000 people. It might be more than that. It might be a day. I have to double check because Mr. Tom Homan, he's like, they've got to get out of here. And they do, because these are some dangerous people and they are here illegally. And what people need to remember is what a lot of these people, they were saying they were seeking asylum and they were refugees and all of these things during that 2021, 2024 period. They were coming over here illegally because they were lying about that status. Again, if you're seeking asylum, you can seek asylum to the nearest country by you. America is not your nearest country if you're seeking asylum. So for, NBC News to put in there, it's like, oh no, there's somebody that was taken and they're not a criminal. Yes, they are, because they're here illegally. They shouldn't even be here. Stop that. We have to remember that ICE is not going to just randomly pick up people. That's not how this works. These people were investigated. They went to their court hearing. They were told by a judge, you need to leave this country. And they've refused to leave. This is what ICE is doing. They are doing their job. They're removing people who are refusing to leave, period. These are not good people. And I don't care. You're like, they didn't commit a crime here, but they committed a crime in their other country. They're not the best and the brightest. That's all I'm saying. They aren't. And we need to keep that 100. We do want people here in our country that are going to help us do better as a country, right? Why would we want people here that are going to do wrong by us? So before we get into Gabbard, I wanted to get into this story right here. Will Iran undergo regime change? Now, I started this broadcast with Jay from Jay's Analysis, and he was talking a lot about how religion is being used to fuel this, right? And outside of religion just being used to fuel this, they're infusing religion with politics in a way to drive people to demand something that God isn't even saying that where we should be or be in, right? And so again, I'm going to leave the clip, watch it, but I played his video first so we could get back into this because he did go over regime changes. So, hey, Sassy, thank you so much. It says, yeah, they aren't the best and the brightest, and that's unfortunate. They're just not. And she's saying, happy Thursday to everybody. Happy Thursday to you too, Miss Sassy. So let's look at this article. It says Iranian opposition figures Reza Pahlavi and Mariam Rajavi have expressed their visions for a possible regime change, claiming the change is inevitable after the recent conflict involving the U.S. and Iran. Now, Israel has been calling for this regime change. And here's what I've seen just in my lifetime. Regime change is really never good, right? The people should be deciding who they want as their leaders. It shouldn't be at the behest of another country saying, hey, I need you to put in this person because they're going to work better with us. I knew somebody in the military that shared with me, we had the choice of putting in somebody who wanted to behead people, right? That was the leader, and he didn't want to listen to anything the U.S. said, or somebody who was sleeping with 9-year-old boys who would do what we told them to do. Yeah. So that's what happens with a lot of these regime changes. It's really disgusting when you think about what they're doing and who they're going to be putting in place. These are sometimes not very good people, right? But even though they're committing maybe heinous crimes that we consider heinous over here, that's okay over there in their country because they're okay with that. The United States would fight to put somebody in like that. So I'm really hoping at a certain point that Donald Trump can pull back and let them deal with themselves and not be a part of this whole regime change thing, because this is what Israel wants. Now, Rajavi, president-elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, NCRI, in an interview with Fox News, which is right biased, emphasized her group's commitment to gender equality and respect for rights of ethnic and religious minorities for a new Iran. Iran's exiled Crown Prince Pahlavi also voiced his readiness to lead Iranians towards a peaceful democratic transition at a press conference in Paris, highlighting his family's golden age rule, which saw Iran's yearly growth above 10% from 1965 to 72. Both leaders emphasized the importance of an organized popular resistance to bring about change. Now, for context, these statements come following recent airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites by Israel and the US, which have led to increased tensions and uncertainty about Iran's future. Recently, US President Donald Trump signaled support for regime change in Iran, contradicting earlier statements from his top security advisors denying regime change as a goal. And I know he was a little back and forth on it, right? And here again is what happened. He got goat roped into this, and this is just my opinion. He got goat roped into it because with Israel, it is for Christians a religious issue, right? And I even had to talk with somebody. It's like for Christians, you want to support Israel, right? Because we are taught that Israel, that's God's chosen people, and you don't want to see anything come harm to them. So he's working with Netanyahu, in my opinion, in that respect, to make sure that he is respecting God and respecting Israel. But you just heard from Jay's analysis that, Israel, that's not it, right? Later on, it became more, and I don't want to get too into it and convoluted because I know everybody has their religious backgrounds, but you have to stop and take a look at, okay, is this really about God or is this about man? Right? And that's where the difficult part comes into, because we are definitely a republic. We are not a theocracy. But somehow that theocracy mentality has come up in this particular situation. And that's, like I said, that's just my opinion, because Israel is a big deal for Christians in their lives. And like I said, I liked what Jay had to say about Israel, because we have to remember that, the kingdom of God is for those who follow God, who are baptized. It's not just Israel. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all pans out. So Fox News, which is right, emphasized NCRI and Rajavi's plans for regime change, as well as their history of opposition to the current Iranian regime. Now, NBC, which leans left, focused on Pahlavi's vision for regime change and his call for a peaceful and democratic transition. It included some criticism of Pahlavi, highlighting the divisive nature of his family's legacy and his support for Israeli airstrikes. The Hill, which is center, highlighted opposition within the Republican Party at Trump's previous claims of a regime change, and quoted White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying he was just suggesting the Iranian people might want a new government. And like I said, it's very convoluted. And so Unc says Paula White and all these evangelical Christians push that we must support Israel BS. So if he's getting it from his spiritual advisor, then that's what he's going to believe. It's always important to have the right people around you giving you the right information to make the right decision. And you're not wrong about that. Like I said, this is very convoluted, because even me as a Christian, it's like I look at the people, right? And I don't want the people to suffer ever at all, right? But at the same time, the government is crazy. The government is off the chain, and I separate the two. I'm like, this Israeli government, they are wild, and they're using that biblical status to try to get away with things that they normally should not be getting away with. Benjamin Netanyahu, he does need to step down, and he needs to face whatever music he's going to face, right? Because he's, there's some international charges against him, and he's going to have to deal with that whenever he deals with it. But he's going to have to deal with that. But again, it's like President Trump is getting goat roped into something that shouldn't be. So I wanted to also look at this. Gabbard calls CNN report on Iran strikes propaganda. Iran says sites badly damaged. Yeah, now there was this whole thing, and I saw a few of individuals, I think it was like Pete Hegseth and President Trump, and I guess they must have been at the what summit were they at? It was the 24th and the 25th, so it's over now. But I want to say it was, let me find it, the NATO summit, yes, in Hague. And so, there were individuals that were from, obviously, his cabinet, Pete Hegseth being one of them, and they were talking a little bit about the strikes and how effective they were. So CIA Director John Ratcliffe and Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard have pushed back on a recent report from CNN, which leans left bias, that said the U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities only set them back a few months. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry said the sites were badly damaged. And I read this yesterday, and I was just kind of like, CNN, what are you doing? You're dealing with propaganda right now. Stop. I would, here's my thing. I would much rather let people that are in the administration speak, and then if we find out something else, but you're not asking them the question, you're just assuming that. And I say, well, who's your source giving you this information? Now, if it had come from maybe one of the ministries, foreign ministers in Iran, that's fine, but they didn't. And so to me, what CNN said was more so opinion than it was factual, right? Because, saying they're badly damaged, okay. Saying that it was setting back a few months, okay, because it could, if it was badly damaged, it could set you back a few months, right? But you're giving conjecture and you're not really giving information. And that's the issue I think that people are having with CNN right now. So the report, CNN attributed its report to 7 people briefed on an early U.S. intelligence assessment from the Pentagon's intelligence arm, the Defense Intelligence Agency. CNN wrote two of the people familiar with the assessment said Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was not destroyed. One of the people said the centrifuges were largely intact. Another source said that the intelligence assessed enriched uranium was moved out of the sites prior to U.S. strikes. Okay, now that's interesting. You have all this information, CNN, but the administration is not putting this out. Okay, and so everybody's a liar. And this is the problem that we have with the Modernization Act, because nobody's accountable for where the truth comes from. They can just say whatever they want. And if somebody else gives pushback, it's like, well, why are they giving pushback? So let's see what Tulsi Gabbard said. So Ratcliffe and Gabbard pushed back. Ratcliffe and Gabbard pushed back on the report and described it as poor journalistic practice. Ratcliffe wrote, the CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged, and described CNN's report as illegally sourced. Gabbard wrote, the propaganda media has deployed their usual tactic, selectively release portions of illegally leaked classified intelligence assessments, intentionally leaving out the fact that the assessment was written with low confidence to try to undermine President Trump's decisive leadership. And that's in my opinion where we're at with a lot of these individuals. They're so bent, I should say, on who's right, who's wrong, or just making somebody look bad, that they're more concerned with making somebody look bad as they are with making sure the American people have information that they need to make good decisions, to be aware and informed. You would rather have people inflamed, right, emotionally, and kind of, off their footing than you would for them to actually be informed. And that's sad. So several media outlets separately covered a claim Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai made to Al Jazeera, which leans left, that Iranian's nuclear installations were badly damaged by Israeli and American airstrikes. Okay. So this is how the media covered it. CNN's report was quickly picked up by many mainstream outlets, mostly from the left and center, but not as much by the right. Pushback from the Trump administration was covered across the spectrum and widely by the right. Yeah. So this is where they're having a divide. And this is concerning, in my opinion, because this is a time where Americans really need to be informed about what's going on over there. But again, because of the modernization, Smith-Mundt Act, propaganda can be used right now. The guardrails are lifted. And so it is very hard to know what to really believe that's out there. And that's something that, I want you guys to remember when you are reading the news. And definitely, like I said, check out all sides. You don't have to just see it when I'm here on the news from 7 to 9 a.m. But like I said, what I like about it is you're actually able to see how people are covering one topic and maybe why they're covering it a certain way. It's unfortunate that news has become a way to corral people and their thoughts, as opposed to really giving people the information and they can come up with their own decisions and opinions, really. We're living in some very interesting times here in American politics. And you guys, it's only June. Oh my gosh. And we're at the end of June already. It just seemed like June just got here. Only have 4 days left of June. And then we'll be into July. And next week is July 4th. Next Friday is July 4th already. It's moving very fast. And I just want to encourage everybody out there, stay focused, stay encouraged. Do not get discouraged about the things happening out here, because, life is going to be a trip. It's going to be scary, but keeping your focus on God, because at the end of the day, he has the last say, which I'm grateful for. Truly, truly grateful for. So with that, we're going to end today's broadcast, but thank you so much for joining me. And thank you so much for our special guest, Torraine Walker, joining us. And again, follow him on X. And I wish you guys all a great day. And remember to stay well, stay focused, and stay unfiltered. I'll see you on the next one.